All right, after Mr. Heap, inshallah, we'll have this young handsome man. He'll talk to us, inshallah, about Care Canada. And then we'll close the event, bi'idhnillah ta'ala. Jazakumullah khair.
Thank you very much for having me. I will try to be brief. My name is David. I teach at the University of Western Ontario in London. And I've been involved in this campaign for a couple of years now. I've been involved in human rights and peace work for as long as I can remember, in one way or another. Just to very briefly remind us why this particular flotilla, this particular campaign to send a Canadian boat to Gaza happened. A couple of years ago, you might remember, in June of 2010, actually right at the end of May, there was an attack on the Freedom Flotilla that had 10 boats, including the Mavi Marmara, a large Turkish boat, which, when that happened, there was an attack. There were 9 people killed, 8 of them Turkish citizens, 1 US citizen. And there was an outcry around the world. There was an outcry in my city. I happened to be visiting Montreal. There was an outcry in Montreal. I'm sure there were people concerned here. But what struck me most, what struck us most, was that people came to us and said, you know, there might have been 2 or 3 Canadians on the Mavi, because there were. A guy called Kevin Nish from BC and a couple of others. They came to us and said, not would it be possible or could we have a Canadian boat to Gaza? They said, when will there be a Canadian boat to Gaza? So we took this as an idea that, well, we had to run with it. We had to find a way to make it possible to increase the Canadian level of participation in this campaign. As I said, I've been doing work on peace campaigns for a long time. I've never been involved in a campaign that set itself a goal of raising enough money to buy a ship. Anybody know how much it costs to buy, not a very large ship, an ocean-going vessel for 30, 40, 50 people? We're talking in the range of $250,000 or more. So we, community, civil society groups, we said, we'll raise $300,000. We didn't know whether we'd make it. In fact, we exceeded that goal. By the winter 2010-11, it was clear to us that we had support coming in from community groups that were contacting us and saying, we want to support this campaign. We want to do something. We want to help you. We want to hold a fundraiser. In my community, lots of people helped, from the mosque, from the students on campus, from other community groups came to us. The Salvadoran community came to us and said, we want to have pupusas for Palestine. They made their traditional food. They made halal food for this occasion, and they sold pupusas at the market for Palestine. Why, they said? They said, because we remember when our country was being bombed by the same F-16s, we wanted people to stand with us. And we have to stand with those people because they're now being bombed. They were bombed by the same military hardware that was used against us. That's just one example among many, many examples of people who helped us raise this amount of money. In addition, we were joined, what we called the Canadian boat to Gaza was the ABCD boat. It was Australian, Belgian, Canadian, Danish, and more. But these other countries had smaller campaigns. They wanted to get on board, so we ended up buying the larger boat, a boat for, can you see all of them there, for 50 people. So we had delegates from all of these countries. We had media from more countries. There was a German journalist, a Russian journalist, an Israeli journalist who was with us. A lot of people joined us. And we were ready to sail by the end of June last year. We had all these people in Greece, the island of Crete in the southern Aegean Sea, ready to sail. Where are we going here? And we were asked, I'll just go back to that picture here. I won't tell you about everybody because we'd be here all afternoon, but just to give you an idea of the sorts of people that were involved, who were willing to put themselves on the line for this campaign. We had a former member of parliament from Australia, a former senator from Belgium, a former mayor of Copenhagen from Denmark, a Quebec Solidaire candidate from Montreal, a provincial politician, and when we had to send somebody to a press conference, who's going to represent this very diverse group of people from different countries and different walks of life? We sent Bob Lovelace, has anybody heard of Robert Lovelace? He's Canadian. He's the former chief of the Ardoch Algonquin First Nation in Ontario. And Bob is a man who, when he talks about opposing oppression and opposing colonialism, he doesn't just talk about it. Bob has been to jail in Ontario because he was defending his people's traditional lands against uranium mining. They wanted to put a mine there, and he said, no, we won't let you do that. And he put himself in the way, and he went to jail. So when Bob talks about opposing oppression, it's not just talk, it's words and deeds. His deeds go with his words. One of the things he said at that press conference was, he said 2 things that stuck with us. One, he said, democracy and colonialism cannot go hand in hand. So we can't talk about what the brother was saying a minute ago, but Israel is a democracy when it is in fact a colonial power that's oppressing Palestine. The other thing he said was because the Canadian government and others were saying, oh, you're just provocation with this flotilla. Why don't you send the aid through proper channels? We'll find a way to send it through proper channels. And what he pointed out was that when you stand against oppression, well, I'll let him tell you his own words. He said, as Indigenous peoples, he's an Aboriginal leader, right? One of the things we've learned about colonialism is that you never ask the oppressor for permission. So if somebody is oppressing, you don't go to them and say, please could I oppose you? You do what is right and you take the consequences. At the end of that press conference, somebody came up and said she wanted to have her picture taken with Mr. Lovelace. Anybody recognize the sister here? Alice Walker is a Pulitzer Prize winning author from the US. Color purple, famous author. She was with the US boat to Gaza. And what Alice said, repeated there and on other occasions, is that these campaigns to challenge the blockade of Gaza are like the freedom rides of our times. You're too young. Some people here might remember the freedom rides. In the 1960s, in the US, there was segregation. There were laws which oppressed African Americans and segregated them in many walks of life. And one of the ways that civil society groups changed that is individuals went and accompanied them and said, if you're going to take a bus where you're forbidden to take a bus, I will go with you. If you want to eat lunch at a place where it's forbidden for an African American a black person to eat lunch, I will go with you. And so people accompanied them and took the consequences. Some of them went to jail, some of them had worse things happen to them. The point that Alice is making is that it is this same instinct, this same urge for human rights that motivates our campaign today, our international campaign to oppose the blockade of Gaza, that motivated her and other people when she was a younger woman working on the freedom rides in the US in the 1960s. Unfortunately, we weren't able to sail from Greece. That week there was a decree from the Greek government which said no boats could leave any Greek harbor. They're bound for Gaza, and immediately the Israeli government was on TV thanking the Greek government for their help and offering to help them with their economic troubles. And this is a cartoon from Carlos Latouf, a Brazilian cartoonist, showing that Israel is giving some kind of reward to the compliant government of Greece who's doing their bidding like an obedient animal. This is, unfortunately, last year, still this year, Greece was in a very vulnerable economic position and they weren't able to have an independent foreign policy. So they ended up, unfortunately, taking the bone. We didn't know the size of the prize at the time. Since then, it's come out that Israel has given military aid worth many millions of dollars to Greece, not because Greece is fighting any wars, because they're fighting a war against their own people, another human rights problem. So we weren't able to sail from Greece. We tried to sail, sorry, I should mention this. We tried to sail. What we did was, with that group of people, we said, are you ready to take the same determination against that we had prepared, right? All of these people had gone saying, we're ready to face whatever happens on the sea. We're ready to face the Israeli Navy on the sea non-violently, with a commitment to non-violent resistance. So we had to say, well, what are we going to do here? So we had a problem getting out of the harbor, which is that we were going to be blocked by the Greek Coast Guard. So these two, Suha from Ottawa and Mike from Sydney, Australia, took one each for the team. They got these kayaks, and we invented the term kayaktivism. They paddled around in front. That's the Greek Coast Guard vessel that was going to block us. They blocked the Greek Coast Guard vessel, and they hung on to the anchor chain, and they wouldn't let them start. So that we had 5 or 10 minutes to get out of the port with the Tahrir. The Canadian boat to Gaza was called the Tahrir, liberation, right? Unfortunately, we were stopped after about 20 minutes by the Coast Guard and brought back to harbor. Things that we learned from this, because whatever you do in life, you learn something. You take a lesson from it. One is that although the Greek people have a long history of supporting Arab liberation in general and Palestine in particular, the Coast Guard commandos who brought us in told us, our families and friends are back on the pier demonstrating in support of your cause. And it's true. The Greek society was with us, was with this cause. The Greek government, unfortunately, not so much. So Greece is not right now an appropriate place to launch a flotilla, to launch a challenge to the blockade. Even though civil society, the trade unions, some of the opposition people are in support of what's going on, the government, unfortunately, isn't or wasn't. Could we get a little focus? Reza's there. Yeah, just the print isn't quite in focus. The other lesson we learned is that if we start the campaign with a highly visible media splash, right, like a press conference with Alice Walker there, it's great for drawing attention to what we're doing, but it also means it's very easy to see this coming and for Israel to put pressure on a country like Greece to stop us, right, to stop the blockade, not just in the territorial waters of Palestine, but in the Greek ports, right? So the blockade, they've outsourced it. It's no longer just outside Palestine. It's in front of Greek ports. That was one positive lesson that we had, was that having international delegates, having this diverse group of people from different countries and having media from different countries was very important. Another lesson is from our captain. George Klonsis is a Greek captain who sailed to Gaza 3 times in the past with previous voyages. And his t-shirt comes from one of those voyages. A British brother gave it to him. It says, "A ship in a harbor is safe, but it's not what a ship is built for." So we had the ship. We knew we couldn't sail from Greece, but we also knew that we couldn't stop. We had to keep going. The basic issues, and this is the human rights lessons you have to know, the basic issues remain. One of those is that the blockade of Gaza is illegal. And it's not just my opinion or our opinion. This is the opinion of the UN High Commission on Human Rights. Okay, the rapporteurs there have repeated in 2010 and again in 2011 that there is no basis in international law. It is a violation of international law to have a blockade of a civilian population like this. So we know that this ongoing problem was continuing. And on the other hand, from our point of view, our partners' organizations in Gaza, Palestinian civil society, repeated in 2011 their call for solidarity, their call for people of conscience to continue to challenge the blockade. They know that they can't depend on governments, not our government, not the United Nations. They might, some of them, say things, but none of them are doing anything. So their call in September, they said, "We are waiting for you on the shores of Gaza." Given that, we knew we had to act. We didn't know, the only question was when, right? So in November, we got together, not with the whole flotilla, but with one other campaign from Ireland, the Irish Boat to Gaza, which ours was the Tahrir, liberation. Theirs is the Sirsha, which means freedom in the Irish language. So we got together, we knew we couldn't sail from Greece, so we were in Turkey. We were able to have a low profile. We didn't have the media campaign before we departed. When we were able to leave port, finally, we unfurled our banners and we originally filed, that's southern Turkey, we were going to a Greek island there, and as soon as we got out of Turkish waters, we changed course, turned away from where we had said we were going, and changed our course towards, from there's Turkey, towards Palestinian territorial waters off Gaza. And I show this course because immediately when we went public, so as soon as we're outside of Turkish waters, we started our press campaign, our press releases, the Twitter, the Facebook, we had with us TV crews. Al Jazeera was on board, Democracy Now! From the States, Press TV from the UK. There was a reporter from Al Masri Al Youm in Cairo who was with us. And they were broadcasting TV and print journalism from as soon as we were clear of Turkish waters. As soon as it got out, the Israeli military spokeswoman started saying, "They're coming towards us in Israel." False. Our course was clear all along. Our course at all times was towards Palestinian waters, international waters towards Palestinian waters of Gaza. What happened? I haven't got time to tell you everything, but I just want to tell you about the people that were with us. We had to reduce our delegation, so in fact we only had 6 people, plus the media and our captain. We have here Ihab Lotoya from Montreal, Mike, one of the Kai activists from Australia, Kit from Washington in the US, myself from London, Ontario, Karen from BC, and Maj Kayal, a young Palestinian from Haifa. And I'd love to play you a clip. There's a little bit of video, but we haven't got time for it. Maj spoke very, very powerfully about the fact that this is a young man, a student, not a lot older than some of you, from Haifa, who cannot travel 135 kilometers to Gaza because of the blockade. So it's a Palestinian who can't travel around his home country. And this, my friends, is one of the characteristics of South African apartheid, which I remember, which is that blacks could not travel around their own country. They had a racist pass law which said they can't travel in certain areas. This is the same reality for the Palestinians in their own country. So Majd had the experience of traveling towards Gaza, steering a boat at one point, bearing a Palestinian flag. right? A country that doesn't have a navy, that doesn't have a merchant marine, but at least one boat was headed towards Gaza, a place where he can't travel to. Unfortunately, we didn't quite make it. The morning of the 4th of November, we had warning signs that the Israeli Navy wasn't far away. We put up these signs saying the blockade is illegal, attacking an unarmed ship is piracy. Majd helped us put them up also in Hebrew, just so that if anybody attacked us, they wouldn't have the excuse of not knowing what was happening. We made the ship pretty for receiving visitors. We put up this banner, including this beautiful banner from a youth group here in Calgary that it sent us for the Tahrir. We were ready, we had the flags, we were ready for what happened. We were finally hailed by the Israeli Navy, and when they said, "What is your course?" we had prepared months in advance our response to that. And our course was the same answer that the flotilla in 2010, one of the captains said. He said, "Our course is the conscience of humanity." That's where we're headed. There's a geographic location, but the real destination is the conscience of humanity. They didn't like that answer. So they said, "What is your final destination?" And Ihab, who's besides an engineer, he's also a poet, he said, "Our final destination is the betterment of mankind." Eventually they came with they blocked all our communications. They blocked the satellite television, internet, satellite phones, all of this stuff. They came with 3 large warships and 15 or so smaller attack vessels. They came with these water cannons, which are the same water cannons that are used to harass the fishermen of Gaza and prevent them from getting offshore to fish in their own waters. They hailed us, they boarded. There's another, this is footage, the blurry photos are taken from video from the Israeli Navy. That's why it's kind of, because we at this point, our TV crews were filming, but they lost their equipment, right? So we have one small clip from Al Jazeera that they were able to get out, but most of this footage isn't from us. So here they are spraying our decks with water cannon, which sounds like it's just water, right? It's seawater, but it's very dangerous on a boat, not very big boat, to have something spraying you like this. When they came on board, and there's a picture of them boarding the Sirsha, which is a smaller boat, and you notice that even though there were 15, they knew there were 15 people on board. They come with overwhelming numbers of commandos, heavily armed commandos. When they boarded the deck of the Tahrir, they came into the wheelhouse where I was with Ihab and our captain George, and they said, back off 5 meters. I said, I can't, it's 5 meters would take me over the sea. They say, back off or we'll electrocute you. And so this is when they use a taser on my arm. The good news is that I was wearing a life jacket. Safety first, right? I was wearing a life jacket, so they couldn't taser me in the chest, which is the worst place to receive an electric charge. It's not a lot of fun on the arm, but it's much better on the arm than on the chest, as it turns out. They knew, they recognized in advance that they weren't going to meet any active resistance. They meant only nonviolent resistance. They're heavily armed commandos. They take control of our boat. They search the boat. They say, we didn't find any munitions, any weapons, any arms. We said, surprise, surprise. You knew that. We told you that. That was well known in advance. They said, when they were going to board us, they said, we want to inspect you. After they came on board and inspected us, they said, we're taking your boat. So they changed their story again. They took our boat from our last point in the Eastern Mediterranean, which was about 45 miles from Gaza. They took it to the Israeli port of Ashdod. We were searched multiple times. We were questioned and brought to this prison in Israel, which, despite all the barbed wire, this is actually a low security prison for people who are being deported. This 4 Canadian men, and we were held with 12 Irish men in one wing. The 5 women from the 2 boats were held in another wing. We ended up being held, a few people were deported on the 3rd or 4th day. Most of us were deported after 6 days. I won't tell you everything about the prison experience, but I do want to say to you that the fact that we were with the Irish boat to Gaza made a big difference, because Ireland is a people that have themselves experienced occupation and also experienced what it is to be a political prisoner. So this month, when we have the amazing, courageous example of 2,000 Palestinian political prisoners starving themselves in a hunger strike, that touches many of us in our hearts, but it touches the Irish people more than others, because they remember their own people being in prison under occupation and hunger striking for their basic human rights. We didn't hunger strike, we were only there for 6 days. The experience, political incarceration, political imprisonment is always wrong. Even 1 day is too much. But keep in mind that Palestinians, political prisoners, are held for months and years without their basic rights. We had consular visits from the Canadian authorities. They don't have a consul that can visit them, right? So whatever happened to us is mainly important because it brings more of the attention of the world on the injustice of the occupation. We were eventually deported back to Toronto. The other thing that I wanted to emphasize is that while we were in prison, we were never alone. There were people, we knew that our people that knew us and people that didn't know us were demonstrating. So this is from the university where I work, but there were people vigiling and holding events, reminding the world where we were. What have I got here? So when we got back, the natural question is, where is our boat? Without going into details, the Israel Law Center, if you have many thousands of dollars, they would love to take you on a tour of Israel's security facilities, including a special exhibition of flotilla boats detained by the Israeli Navy in an IDF Navy base. My friends, I don't know if you've seen the Pirates of the Caribbean or something like that. This is what pirates do, okay? Pirates steal stuff on the high seas and then show it off to their friends. It's called booty, right? Nowadays, these are state pirates. These are pirates that have the power of a very powerful military state, but it's still the basic behavior of a pirate culture, right? That steals stuff and does this. We don't know that the Tahrir is there, but we suspect it's there because there's 10 or a dozen boats from the previous flotilla that are still held by the Israeli Navy there. Again, completely illegally in international law. What did we achieve? Very importantly for me, for all of us, we sent a message to the Palestinians of Gaza that they've not been forgotten. Because the worst thing, if you're in prison, and Gaza is an open-air prison, there's 1.6 million people who are deprived of their freedom of movement. The worst thing if you're in prison is if you think that people have forgotten about you. So sending that message, that morning, the 4th of November, when we were thinking might be getting close to Gaza, I got an email from a colleague of mine, a French prof from Al-Aqsa University in Gaza. He said to us, whether or not you reach the shores of Gaza, your message of solidarity has reached all of Palestine. So this is very important, that they know that. The second message is to the government of Israel and the governments that are working with the government of Israel, supporting the government of Israel, like Mr. Harper's government, is that you can oppress people, you can impose a system of apartheid, you can try to intimidate people, but we will keep coming back. We will keep coming back because that's what human solidarity demands. That's what the liberation, the boat is called liberation, that's what the liberation of our sisters and brothers in Palestine demands. We have to keep going. I'll briefly present to you here. This is a photo taken by one of our Belgian friends that was with us on the Tahrir. She went to a refugee camp in Gaza, and she took this photo of this little girl and her little brother. And the girl's words say, "They took away my childhood because I have to look after Hitam. I know that our parents died because everyone is with Israel, but when I see those boats coming, I think we're not alone anymore. Please don't forget about me, otherwise I will die too, and no one will look after Hitam." And that's the words of Hind, who was 8 years old in Khan Yunis refugee camp in Gaza. These are two of the reasons, two human reasons, among 1.6 million human reasons why we can't stop. We must find a way to keep, not just the same way, but we have to keep challenging the blockade, keep challenging the occupation of Palestine. So there's many things that we're going to keep doing, but the thing I want to talk to you today about to end is Gaza's Ark, which is an announcement we just made this week. I have some paper copies of this that I'd love you to take. It's a new initiative to keep challenging the illegal blockade of Gaza. Rather than trying to sail in and not arriving, we're now going to build an ark, fulk, an ark in Gaza, and sail out, right? Because the blockade goes in two directions. Palestinians in Gaza can't travel freely, and people, the world can't travel to them, even though they have a port, which is the only port on the Mediterranean which is not open to shipping. So we will build a boat in Gaza or rebuild a boat in Gaza using existing resources. They have a traditional fishery, a traditional shipbuilding industry, but it's paralyzed because the economy is in tatters because of the occupation. We will not only employ people there, we will buy products from local businesses and say we have international buyers and non-governmental organizations who have the confidence in your economy that you don't want to be aid dependent, you want to trade and travel with the world, right? So this is our campaign. Again, we have an ambitious goal. We can only do this with the support of communities like you. The Boat to Gaza, the Tahrir, doesn't belong to the steering committee of the Canadian Boat to Gaza campaign. It belongs to communities across this country who dug deep in their houses of worship, in their trade union halls, in their campuses, in their community groups, and peace groups and associations, and helped us buy this boat. We have confidence we can do this again. So the campaign has been launched this week at GazaArc.org or on Facebook, GazaArc, or Twitter, GazaArc. Follow it. This is going to work because of international solidarity, because we have an international presence watching what's going on, building this boat, and having faith and building hope. More than building a boat, we're building hope for the Palestinians of Gaza that the blockade can end, not because governments do the right thing, but because people lead the way with human people-to-people solidarity. So we have a declaration. I also have some paper copies of that, which is online, which is about getting the Tahrir back. We are, of course, looking for contributions. You all want the beautiful Tahrir t-shirt, soon to be a collector's item because it's going to be replaced by the ARC t-shirt very soon. We take contributions, but you can tell your parents about that. Help us continue to sail to oppose the blockade of Gaza as Canadians, but also basically as human beings who are concerned about human rights in Palestine and here and throughout the world. Thank you very much for your time.